Welcome back to a new video. This one is gonna be a game review of a flawless game that I played. Or it's very close to flawless aside from the first decisions in round 1, and then practically all following decisions were within 1.5 win probability of the bot's preferred choice. So it's very close to optimal, and I think this game has many interesting decisions, and I kind of want to analyze it through the framework I explained, which should really help illustrate how easy it is to make good decisions. So my opponent has the first move, and I think the decision here is already quite interesting. It's a very good runout for my opponent. That would be about 65% win probability, many valuable tiles, and a very strong start. The best move for him would be to immediately start taking white tiles in row 4, kind of claiming middle column, plenty of blue tiles that will allow him to complete his row 3, or at the very least either of those two rows, and then he would just have a great start that he could build away with. Instead, he played a different move, which is to take 2 blues in row 4, and after his first move, the game is already in my favor, which is quite crazy considering that I haven't even made a move yet. I guess it kind of shows how bad column 4 is, and the main idea why it fails is that he is now, well, he's by no means locked into building column 4, but row 4 blue only really makes sense to build early in the game if you are building column 4. So he's kind of like likely going for a structurally weak column, while I can contest him on one of the better columns or the best column, which would be middle column. Which kind of like leads my first move to quite an obvious decision. So I can either immediately take 2 white tiles in row 4, which I think would be strong, but I instead took 2 blue tiles in row 3, mainly to contest the most common color of the round. That's kind of my simplification on how I evaluate round 1s, is that if the most common color is relevant for my board and my scoring, I'm just gonna take it immediately in order to not get stuck on it later. And if I'm trying to build middle column, then I wouldn't want to be stuck on this column row 3 if all the blue tiles came out already, especially considering that I may want to threaten row 4 blue later in the game. So I take 2 blue, he takes 2 blue to complete his row 4, and now I have quite an interesting decision between 2 white and a token, or 3 red and a token. Personally, I think both options are quite good. I opted for the 3 red because I didn't really like the idea of him finishing 4 rows. He would kind of not be locked into column 4, and he could opt out, pivot, and kind of like try and get good top rows. The 3 reds aren't really menacing, so you can definitely allow that and instead just take 2 white and get a great setup yourself. But in the game I chose to take the red tiles just to complete my row 2 early, which also leaves yellows as the only good row 2 option for him if he wants to build from the middle. So I take the 3 red away and complete it. He takes 2 white, quite a natural move, kind of now committing to this particular column. And a better move might have been to take a blue tile in row 1. It would have ended with him getting very ugly top rows, most likely. But now that I get this row 3 completion, I think it makes a lot of sense for me to unclog it. Alternatively, you could also still take 2 white in row 4, also a reasonable move, but I believe having some extra flexibility going into the next round is quite nice by having completed my row 3. Here he played a move I did not really consider, which is 2 yellow in row 2. It kind of makes sense from the structural side, because his column is gonna require a lot of yellow tiles, like this entire diagonal, if he wants to get kind of like the optimal build going. So getting ahead on the yellow tiles and building from the middle in row 2 is definitely a good idea. Personally, I think there are more important tiles in the round, like white tiles, that he should have probably contested instead. But I understand the decision to go for yellow tiles in row 2. The only downside being that they aren't quite as contested. And here we get quite an interesting decision at the end of the round. So I'm gonna open up the sandbox for this one and then kind of like go through the two options that exist. What should you do here? So there's one very clearly contested color, which are the white tiles. They're going to be relevant for my opponent's board. One of the structural downsides of column 4 is that you require a lot of white tiles. So if you want to complete row 1, 2 and 5, you would already require 8 whites, and given that white tiles are contested by both middle column and column 2 and column 3, you will often not be able to get this row 3 and row 4 with white, which just makes it, like, kind of adds to column 4 being a bad column. So I think the obvious move would be to just take 2 white tiles, my opponent would get a white tile, and then I could take a yellow in row 1, and he would take the black tiles in row 1. So this would kind of be the obvious move, but there's also like this turn compression idea, because in the previous line you saw that my opponent had 2 useful moves. They would get an additional white tile in row 5 and they would get a top row. Now, the way turn compression works is that if you take out a color, so this would be like a very simple situation, if you take out a color, you thereby remove a move. You can also set this up over more rounds by merging tiles and forcing colors to disappear, or taking a color out over multiple moves. So you can definitely like find more elaborate patterns, but this would be the very simple option, where if I take out a yellow, my opponent would only have 1 move instead of 2 remaining moves, which definitely has to be evaluated. Now, if you're a top 2 row builder, then you would think, okay, he has to still complete his first row. That I wouldn't really find too worrying. Like, the white tiles are clearly the most valuable color for me, so he will have to take white tiles, but if he took them in row 1, it wouldn't really be that strong, I think, since he has to discard quite a few tiles, and then I would still get the black tiles. Maybe I would play them in 4, something like that, and I could pivot over, requiring less white tiles for the moment, only needing them in row 3. I believe a setup like this would make sense, given that I've gotten reds in row 2, and then I could go for red tiles in row 5. So this would be one of his options. But taking the white tiles in row 1 is not really the worrying option. The alternative would be he could also, of course, also play them in row 5. But again, I don't think this would be a massive threat. It would probably be better than to play them in row 1 due to the flexibility, and then he would still be able to play a good game. But the really bad option would be if he ended up getting white tiles in row 3. And this, I think, would be by far the strongest out of his options here, because that way he would have a great board that allows him to score a lot of points in the future by having a great staggered setup in his row 2 and row 3, and having completed the blue tiles in row 4, he would then start threatening blue tiles in row 2, blue tiles in row 3. There are more than enough white tiles remaining for him to build column 4 down the line. Right, he's just gonna need yellow tiles in row 3 and 3 white tiles in the 5th row in order to make that happen. So he has plenty of options, great top row scoring. He's going to keep all of his points, and this would be the most worrying line, I think, because the white tiles in row 3 really enable his board, making blue tiles more valuable immediately in his top rows. Black tiles he could then start threatening in row 3 and row 4, and from there he can really take the game in many different directions. The reason why this would work so well is because he would create a big tile imbalance on the white tiles that are mutually valuable, and pacing wise he's in no trouble. So given that he took the most contested colors in the round and the most common colors in the round, the future runouts are going to contain more red tiles, more yellow tiles, more black tiles, and he's created a bunch of use cases for them that makes it less important for him to unclog this row 5 as soon as possible, for example. Of course, I could also take the black tiles in row 5 and then try and contest the white tiles in row 4. That would still be an option for me, but I would also be very, very starved of the most valuable color in the round for both of us. So giving him 3 white to place in row 3 would just be a pretty big mistake in my opinion, which is why I couldn't go for it in the game and instead chose the more obvious option of taking 2 whites in row 4, simply getting progress, taking a color that came out with a lot of tiles, and he can now take 1 additional white. I can take yellow in row 1. That way I will even keep a point out of this round, and he's gonna have to overpay on his top row by taking the blacks. Now on my row 5 I'm not really in such a hurry, given that 18 black tiles are still to come out, and my opponent long term doesn't have great use cases for them, which is one of the big reasons why contesting column 4 in column 3 makes a lot of sense, is that he will simply not have a good time defending blacks and probably should potentially not even do it at all and just allow me the completion. So that's like one of the big structural downsides, which is why his first move of the round was already so drastically bad. Going into round 2, I think my first move is quite obvious. It's a great run out for me. I can immediately take 3 yellow tiles that he requires for his column. None of the white tiles are merged yet, so that would be another very contested color, but there's no rush to really get started on that. Now, his first decision is quite interesting, and he made the correct choice of taking 2 yellow tiles in row 3, mainly because his board requires them. He would still want to threaten them in row 4, and while putting out 2 white in the token for me is not great, it would be far worse to allow me to take yellow tiles in row 2, because then he would remain stuck on row 3 out of this round, and he would not really be able to make a lot of progress and get more scoring in that row. So his decision is correct to take 2 yellow. I take 2 white, of course. That's a no-brainer move. And he grabs another yellow to complete his row 3, which once again gives me an easy decision of taking the black tiles in row 5. Given that I still have flexible scoring options in row 2 with both blue, black and white tiles, there's no rush on that. And I of course want to take the black tiles out as soon as possible, so that, for example, row 4 would no longer be an option for him or anything like that. So I try to take my fair share of that in order to make progress on my column. And here he makes a very awkward move. A move that could have worked for him would be to play black tiles in row 2. That way I would not be able to make more progress on that, and he would get his row 2 and put a little bit of a stop to my building. But he instead took black tiles in row 4, and that's a really, really bad move, in my opinion at least, because the issue that comes with it is that the black tiles in row 4 are quite worthless for him. He will not be able to fill in row 4 with white later in the game. He will not be able to get his row 3 white. So getting these black tiles, they're very isolated and they don't really serve much of a purpose. Which is why he would never want to commit to black tiles in row 4, given that he has this very strong scoring option of getting yellow tiles in row 4 instead, that if he fills in the red tiles could be worth up to 6 points. So that was quite a bad move, and it leaves me in a very interesting and also a subtle end of round situation that I want to quickly talk about once again by opening the sandbox to illustrate some differences here. So here we've got this end of round situation that has a very interesting and subtle decision. So first of all, this row to red would be quite good for him, of course, because that way he could start threatening red tiles in row 3 in the next round, and also he would just get quite good building. So one idea would be to take the red tile from the platform, leave 5 colors in the middle and make him go last. He could just grab the blue tiles. I would then have to take my row 2 and deny the white tiles. And he could take a black tile. I would have to discard one. And he would take the yellow. So we would get out of the round like this. I would have 2 black tiles in my row 5, the token, a good board. This would still be favorable for me and quite a good setup, but there's a better idea here that will differ a little bit, and it has to do with the black tiles in row 5. So if I was to take the row 2 immediately with white tiles, then he would be forced to actually like merge his row 2s if he wants to get them. And if he was to take the black tile away, well, then I could simply take the red tiles, and if he wanted to get his top row, I would be able to deny his row 2. And in this case, I think this would be quite a strong idea, because his row 2 is kind of what his scoring depends on, given that his row 3 is not going to be very high scoring, needing blue tiles and white tiles to make that work, which is very uncertain. So he can't really take the black tile away in this line, and would probably instead have to take a yellow tile, in which case I could either take my top row, I mean probably I could play it like this instead, and he would take the blue and I would get a black tile. And that way I would get an additional black tile in my row 5, which makes a huge difference, because now this row 4 is going to be way harder to unclog, and my row 5 is going to be very easy to unclog. Having the token in the round, most of the time you would assume 4 tiles to come out with the remaining tile counts, and the next distribution will often include a 2 stack, so you can immediately finish it in one move instead of having to spend multiple, which is going to be a huge advantage over the alternative line I showed. And that's what happened in the game. I take the white tiles immediately. He takes the yellow in row 1. I can now take the red tiles to get better centralized building and take out this nice row 2 for him. And here, once again, I think in his shoes you should consider taking the black tile and letting me discard the blue tiles. But the correct choice is to grab the row 2, simply because of how good it is, and especially with blue tiles, it gives you a better shot at realizing this row 3 and getting good scoring long term. So taking the blue tiles is still gonna be the correct option, and I can get the black tile and a much favorable position. Round 3 is gonna be the most interesting round, and the first decision is gonna be quite obvious. So unclogging my row 5 is of course a high priority here, simply to get a good board and be able to focus all of my remaining moves of the game on upper row scoring. Especially since my opponent may want to unclog this row 4. If they don't unclog it in this round, then it may be very hard for them, depending on the next runout, to ever even threaten this row 4 with yellow, meaning that their row 4 scoring over the course of the game is really poor. So taking 2 black, he takes 2 red in row 2, and here the interesting decision begins. So one relatively obvious idea would be to take the blue tile and the token and put it in row 1. The idea why this might be a good move is because the blue tiles, the remaining blue tiles, are going to be merged as pairs of 2, which really favors me distribution wise, given that if I wanted to play blue tiles, it would be in row 2 or row 4. So that way I could kind of ensure that I wouldn't have to overpay trying to complete one of those rows, whereas my opponent's use cases for blue tiles would lie in row 1 and row 3. So both of which he would have to overpay trying to complete them with one of these 2 remaining tiles. That would be one idea, but the issue with that is that it does not really contest the most important tiles in the round, and kind of allows my opponent to make progress on the white tiles in row 5 and unclog his board, making the game a lot more playable for him. So looking at this decision in the sandbox, if you were to take the blue tile, your opponent could simply start taking the white tiles, unclog his row 5, and there are still 5 red tiles and 4 blue tiles in the round that he doesn't really have to make a decision on, which makes it quite hard for me to play. So if I now decided to, I don't know, take 2 blue tiles in row 2 to take out this row 3, he would simply be able to continue taking the white tiles, and then if I take, for example, this, he could maybe even just take red, make me go last, make me overpay on this, and he would kind of like get out of the round getting a decent setup and even forcing floor line losses. On me, of course, this would be like I kind of just made random moves here, but it's quite important to not allow the completion of this, because it would be quite hard for me to actually turn this into something that would favor me. So once again, in a situation like this, if I was to take the red, then he could of course simply take the blue tiles out, get a nice row 3, I would take the yellow, and he would be able to take the black or something like that, and then I would once again have a nonsense move and he could take the red tiles. And as you see by the scoring, he would actually be ahead, not really have many problems, and would still be able to score a good amount in future rounds. This might still be okay for me, having the token and having a lot of future scoring myself, but it doesn't really look super convincing to go down a line like that, and the alternative option is quite a bit better, and of course it's going to be about the white tiles, but understanding why it works so well is going to be the important part. So first of all, my opponent will not be able to unclog this row 4 with black tiles. I can guarantee that they also won't be able to complete this row 5 in this round. Now, what does that mean? It means that I can clog my opponent out of multiple colors for the next round. And I'm just gonna go down a little bit down the line and then explain in a later situation why that is incredibly strong in this particular instance. So taking a white tile immediately is a good idea for me. I took from this platform in order to also merge 2 yellow, for him to never have the option of discarding yellow tiles and denying me this great row 2, which might be the case in the other line where I take the blue. I think he could also like immediately discard a yellow tile, and then I would have to take blue tiles in row 2 and some lines like that. But here wanted to avoid it, immediately merging 2 yellows. That would of course be perfect for me, since I would get more vertical adjacency and would have a better shot at restoring horizontal adjacency. So taking a white tile in row 3, which already leaves him in quite a tough decision. He took 2 reds in row 1, and now I can of course continue merging, and this would be one of the ideas I had, to just take a white tile and stop the completion of his row 5. So one thing that's important to understand here is that his decisions are going to be quite forced. For example, if he was to try and take a white tile away, then I could simply take the black tile, and he couldn't really allow me this row 2 yellow option. Of course, also if he ever was to commit to a row 3, he's kind of interdependent on it, meaning if he commits to one color, he can no longer play the other color. Then he would just get a full floor line, so something like this wouldn't work. Alternatively, of course, also works in the other direction. So he would have to take 2 yellow away, and then I could still simply take the blue tiles myself, because they would be better. I could also consider taking them in row 2. I'm not actually too sure which one of those 2 options would be better. And he would take the red tiles. We would go into the next round like this. He's gonna be fully clogged out of yellow tiles, fully clogged out of red tiles, and I would be ahead by quite a few points, still score this massive point bomb with the yellow tiles in the next round. That would be worth a lot of points. My blue tiles in row 1 are staggered, and I've simply got a great board, so that's not really possible. His strongest move here is to take the black tile immediately, to not allow this row 1 completion. And now the main idea would be between taking a white tile and the 2 yellow tiles. And both of these options work great. So the first thing that I had calculated all the way back when I took a white tile was that after I force him to discard these yellow tiles, that I could play blue tiles in row 4, and that would of course still give me a very nice position. I would be a little bit ahead in points, but much more importantly, my future scoring is going to be very high, still filling in the black tiles in row 1 for 7 points. The blue tiles are worth a lot of points. The yellow tiles are worth a lot of points, and I still have flexible scoring in row 3, since the most common colors in the bag would be red tiles and black tiles, and my opponent in the next round cannot even play red tiles, and they also, aside from row 2 and row 4 that they've started, don't really have that much use for the black tiles, which means if they don't get them in row 3, let's say, then 7 black tiles would remain that I can use for my row 1, 2, and row 3. So I've got plenty of future scoring, but of course that would come with the risk of going into round 6. So it's also an option to play it like this, which would be quite strong. In the game I chose a different option, which is to take the yellow tiles and forcing him to deny the white tile, because now he really cannot allow it. Once again, if he takes a row 3, he's gonna get a full floor line on top of that. So he has to take the white tile, and now I can, of course, take the blue tiles. You wouldn't really want to take the blue tile in row 1. It's simply way too expensive. You're going to lose way too many points. And if you watch my video on conceding row 1s, I kind of talk about that a bit. Why it's not super important to try and complete your top 2 rows completely, and why having the flexibility and just a very strong board is going to be more important, because completing 4 row 1s is going to be quite easy, and completing both 5 row 1s and 5 row 2s is going to be harder to accomplish. So I really don't mind taking the blue tiles in row 4, and he will have to take the red tiles. That was the line I've chosen in the game, and just to understand better why this is so good, especially forcing my opponent into the red tiles in row 3, would be that my opponent cannot play yellow and he cannot play red in the next round. 8 tiles of both colors remain in the bag, which means that the next round is likely going to contain both colors, and if he cannot play either of them, that means he is guaranteed to take discards in the next round. So if we get, let's say, like a very normal and balanced distribution of him getting 4 yellows and 4 red tiles coming out, then he would be guaranteed -6 in a case like that, which of course would be horrendous. So I've set up this huge color asymmetry of yellows and red tiles that I can still place however I want, score them in row 4. They're kind of worthless to me too. I don't really care to score them, but I can still score them. That's the big difference, and to my opponent they're massively harmful, and he cannot not being able to play either of them. If the next runout is imbalanced and only one of the colors comes out frequently, then he will still have to spend a lot of time and resources trying not to take that particular color, and the odds of both of these colors not being frequent in the next round are simply going to be low. So one of the reasons why playing it aggressively and giving my opponent the token in this round is quite valuable is what I had mentioned in my token video. The fact that if my opponent starts the next round, round 4, that I would be able to grab the token for round 5, which generally is quite strong, and Here I think it actually applies because I will have a lot of use cases for the colors that he may put in the middle, and it's actually going to be quite hard for him to avoid the situation of me not getting the token in the next round, since given that he's gonna take from a platform, he's gonna often put single tiles into the middle, and I've got many use cases for single tiles in the next round. So I can take blue tiles and black tiles in row 1. If he puts out a blue tile, I can also play it in row 2, and if he puts out a white tile, I can play it in row 3, which gives me a great opportunity on very most first moves that he's going to play to immediately grab the token in the next round, which makes this just another great aspect of playing this entire round and not taking the token myself earlier by taking the blue tile in row 1. So playing out the round, he did take the black tile, I take the yellow tiles, he takes the white tile, and I grab the blue tiles, of course. We go into the next round, and from there the game is already decided. There isn't really much he can do in very most runouts. The only runout that would have potentially been problematic, that worried me a little bit, is if, let's say, 4 blue tiles come out and the distribution is 2-1-1, he could potentially have gotten this row 3 and tried to contest the tiles like that. But while disrupting me on my row and then disrupting the vertical adjacency to the whites and whatnot, that would be about like the only runout that really would hurt me. But in a runout like this, where the tiles are somewhat scattered, it's just a matter of filling in my top rows, given that the blue tiles are still very spread out. I don't have to worry about the low remaining tile count, and I can just start by taking the white. It's gonna be a no-brainer move. And the remaining moves of the game are very similar fashion. So he takes out the blue tile, which doesn't really make much sense since I can still simply take them one by one and forcing my row 2 completion, which is kind of like the only worthwhile thing doing for the rest of the round. Also, regarding the yellows and the red tiles, I don't really have to worry about giving him any particular color, since I can play red tiles in row 4 for 1 point, and if he discards the yellow, he would get 3 discards. Alternatively, if I have to play the yellow tiles, then he would have to discard 4 tiles. So there isn't a big difference between him getting a particular color, which means that I can simply contest the tiles that I need and get my row 2. He takes 2 white, and once again I can just continue merging tiles and grabbing the blue tiles, which doesn't really leave any good options for him. For example, here, if he was to try and take out the blue tile, I could even take 4 black tiles in row 4. It's just very, very one-sided, given that my board is super flexible and his board is super clogged. There are no good options for him. He takes the black tile. I can now take a white tile to leave him stuck in his row 5 for an additional round. He takes the black tiles, which is probably better than taking the blue tile and forcing me to overpay on this row 1. I take a blue tile, and he has to discard, and I even get to score a point with the red tiles. The main issue here is, again, he's still stuck on this row 5, and his row 4 was a massive pain over the entire game, so that's kind of what lost him the game. And in round 5, of course, it will only be a matter of filling in my rows and ending the game. So this round 5 is not going to be very instructive. Of course, I only have one option of ending the game, which is to complete my row 2. And even though going into round 6 wouldn't really be worrying, given like by how much I'm ahead and whatnot, ending the game is going to be the right idea, and overpaying is not going to be a problem. And now I can just take a black tile from the platform. One cool idea if you want to make your opponent go last is to put 5 tiles in the middle as soon as possible if you're the player starting the round. So I've taken from a platform, he's taken from a platform. If I now put 5 tiles in the middle, and he takes from a platform again, then I would always have the chance to make him go last as long as he doesn't take out a color. So taking black tile in row 1, of course denying his row 2 scoring and getting my own. He takes a white tile and I can just make him go last. Once again, an interdependent situation on row 4, that if he was to commit to either the red tiles or the yellow tiles, then he would end up discarding all of the remaining tiles, which is why he can't really commit to it, and we can just play around it and delay the move until the final decision, where I can now take the red tiles and get this high scoring row 3 and give him the lower scoring row 4. I hope my analysis of this game was useful and shows why it's necessary to contest the most important tiles for both players, rather than only thinking about your own board. And aggressively contesting your opponent's tiles is always going to be the easiest way to win a game. Also, about my top row concession in the earlier round, I ended up not getting a final row 1, but it's perfectly fine, because due to all of the problems my opponent had in previous rounds, he also wasn't able to complete his final row 2. The difference being that he had to concede it in the final round and did not get any compensation for it.